While Democrats talk and in some ways believe in getting big money out of politics, they're totally addicted to big money. Why can't we stop new drilling in federal lands? He's given more permits on new drilling than Trump did. Without a better democracy, we won't have the health care. We won't solve the climate crisis. We won't deal with racial justice. We won't deal with the inequality of wealth.
I'm very pleased to be here with you. This is Larry Cohen, and we're here in Washington, D.C., and perhaps you could tell us where exactly we're sitting in Washington, D.C., by the water?
Sure, we're sitting in what's called the Washington Channel of the Potomac River, next to the Yacht Club, and there's Joe Manchin, Senator from West Virginia, his yacht, right over there, the largest yacht in the Yacht Club.
And that's the now infamous Senator Manchin.
It is. There have been demonstrations of kayaks and others that Greenpeace and others brought right to the yacht. He's one of two Democratic senators, and the Senate is evenly divided now, 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and he's one of two that has prevented even the moderate change, from my point of view, that we were hoping for.
Right. And you're the chair of the Our Revolution movement, and you've come from a trade union background.
Yep.
And do you think you could say something to an international audience about what the Our Revolution movement is?
Sure.
And where you've come from?
Sure. So first of all, I spent 39 years full-time in the Communication Workers Union.
Right.
Ended up as the last 10 years as president of the union, then the national union. I knew Bernie Sanders since he first came to Congress. He was a member of the House of Representatives from Vermont, and he was always there on every issue, right, from my point of view. So we were good friends. Before my term ended, I had decided not to run again, and I said to him, I'm going to support you if you run, because it wasn't clear then. This is in 2014. He never changed his mind on, what to me was the mission, which was that it's not about the rulers, it's not about candidates, it's about building a movement to hold candidates accountable, and the candidates come out of a movement, and that's the way, not only in the United States, but in most of the world where we have any version of democracy, that's the way we can change things. You build an ongoing movement, and candidates can come out of there at different levels, and that the role of our revolution was to keep all these groups that we had started, as many as possible, going and growing. They had to be growing, so that we could really do three things. So one is the base. If we think of it as a triangle, the base of the triangle is issues. The only reason I do any of this is I want to be happier. I want my children, grandchildren to be happier, my friends, people I care about. And so the issues is what makes us happier. The other two sides are elections. Elections don't make us happier. They're a means to the issues, right? And then in this country, the other side to us is changing the party, building the party. And 90% of the time, that's the Democratic Party. In a few cases, it could be an independent party. On the national level, our revolution clearly is staking out the territory. There are 57 Democratic parties, 50 states, 7 territories, and that we have to work inside at the county level, our way up, and change those 57 parties. And that has happened not just because of us, lots of other allies we have, but that has happened in about 20 of those parties. So at this point on the National Democratic, it's called the Democratic National Committee, we have close to 100 of the 450 permanent people that are elected on there. Right. And again, I've been on there for 17 years, who sort of see it the way we would see it, not exactly, but more or less.
And how many members has Our Revolution got? It's a membership organization, or is it a campaigning organization, or both?
Oh, it's definitely both. So the outer membership, this is not the simplest question to answer. The outer membership, meaning the people that are on emails that it's the outer circle, is, believe it or not, 8 million. It's very large. Right. But the inner circle, which is the people who donate $5 a month, things like that, and are active in physical ways, not just online, is probably 200,000.
Right. That's still very substantial.
Yeah, and the good thing about it is that in most congressional districts, and that's our building block for change here. It's not the House, it's not the Senate, it's the House of Representatives. We would have 7,000 or 8,000 people and as many as 20,000. And that's enough, particularly in a primary, to make a huge difference.
Right. What would you say the politics of our revolution is?
I would not describe it as socialist. I would describe it, but the leading issues makes it easier. So Medicare for all, which would cut the cost of health care in half here, down to about 12% of GDP from 20%. That's a gigantic, whopping, something like $1.5 trillion a year saving that could be invested in other things. It's the climate crisis. So we just ran a big campaign with allies to stop subsidizing the fossil fuel companies on top of the subsidies that every corporation gets in America, which result in them paying no taxes. The fossil fuel companies for the last 100 years have another whole stack of subsidies that they get. So that would be an example of the climate crisis. Second issue, healthcare, climate crisis. Voting rights is actually the democracy itself, which fits partly the theme of your book, Taking Control and of Open Democracy. The democracy itself is actually the leading issue, and we do surveys all the time to engage our members. The leading issue is democracy, healthcare, climate crisis, racial justice, which has a bunch of pieces to it.
Biden got a 7 million plurality, and only just managed to win the election by 42,000 votes in terms of the 3 key states.
Yeah.
Why isn't that such a crucial key issue for the Democratic Party?
I can tell you that our members voting, which we do constantly, because how do you keep in touch with all these people? With a relatively low budget, and so polling is constant for us, and they definitely see the rules and the need for democratic reform, led by voting rights, but also abolish the Electoral College. Why isn't the president elected with a popular vote? Which in any other country it would be. The way the Senate operates, every state has 2 senators. And so the 50 Democratic senators have 40 million more population than the 50 Republican senators. I mean, the rules go on and on and on here. The layers of problems. Then the way the Senate operates, where it takes 60 senators to put a bill on the floor, but only 50 to pass the bill. Our members would see those rules and the democracy itself, voting rights in particular, and the attacks on voting rights, and partially inside the Democratic Party, but more importantly outside general election rules, as the #1 issue. Because they believe that without a better democracy, we won't have the health care, we won't solve the climate crisis, we won't deal with racial justice, we won't deal with the inequality of wealth.
Their opponents in that argument are inside the Democratic Party.
In part, some of this, the totality of the Democratic Party would embrace. That's the good news. But on the edges, a lot of it they oppose, especially trying to reform voting rights in Democratic primaries, things like that. It's almost as hard as challenging the Republicans on voting rights in a general election.
And how would you describe the politics inside the Democratic Party that is opposed to what you're arguing for?
Corporate consultants, wealthy donors, definitely the 1% of the 1%, that while Democrats talk and in some ways believe in getting big money out of politics, they're totally addicted to big money. They use the excuse that, well, that's what it takes to win, when it also takes to win that you have, as my great-grandmother said, I grew up in her house, I'll watch your feet, not just your mouth. You can't just have words all the time. And too many Democrats run on words and then there's no results. So why can't we cut the price of insulin by 75% so that it becomes affordable for working class people? That's the simplest thing. Why can't we forgive at least $10,000 of student debt? The president could do that. Why can't we stop new drilling in federal lands? He's given more permits on new drilling than Trump did. And this list goes on and on and on. And so people are, including me, incredibly frustrated. But at the same time, we know that we unite to fight the fascists that are now taking over the Republican Party. And they're fascists in a technical way, I mean that.
But there's the monsters outside are getting kind of 40% support. They're getting a lot of support. They're getting much more support than I thought they would get after the 6th of January. And there's this feeling that the fight back, you're very passionate about it, but there's a sense of a lack of energy in that fight back.
Yeah, so I think that, again, I just spent, my whole life since I was 18 doing this. So yeah, but I think, you know, for most people, they don't see enough of the change. What I like to say is politics has to make us happier.
Right.
And you can do that sometimes on a local level. And a lot of our groups, that's where they work, is on a local level. They change their town council. And then they have maybe better schools, better housing, something make them happier, better policing even. The problem is that, that on the national level, you know, going back to the landslide election of 2009, then you had Trump 4 years intervening, there's almost nothing you can point to that got done that makes people happier. And, you know, Obama would say, if he was sitting here, Larry, we passed, you know, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and I would say, yes.
With who you work with, Obama?
Yeah, oh, very closely. But I would say yes, and I love you dearly, but it's not working. It's much better than nothing, but we're still paying 20% of GDP on healthcare, and working class people, you know, who I've represented and worked with my whole life, are still getting screwed on healthcare.
There's something positive about this situation. It seems to me that certainly since 2010, since the rise of Bernie, I mean, there is an energy in the political situation here and a creative sense. You're talking about 200,000 members of our revolution, active members, 8 million. These are very, very large numbers.
From the time I was 18 to 30, we had millions and millions of young people changing this country. I think there are parallels in terms of younger Americans, whether they're black, brown, or white, feeling like this is a multicultural country and that we're on the march. And that in a certain way, that is parallel to what I felt as a young activist and organizer in the 1970s.
The result of the 1970s was 4 decades of reaction. Do you feel now we're coming out of a reactionary moment that is going to lead to 4 decades of progress?
That's a tough question to answer. 4 decades is a really long time. So I actually don't know. I think at most in terms of 1 decade.
Right.
And I think I'm reasonably optimistic that that we can sustain this change in the immediate next 10 years.